All right, well, in a not so surprising clip, Bernie Sanders was with Anderson Cooper, and to Anderson Cooper's credit, he pushed him first on how much Medicare for All would cost, in which Bernie Sanders stated it would cost $30 trillion, but that we would just pay for it with a modest tax on Wall Street speculation, which is nonsense because that's assuming the amount of trading would remain the same. Once you make it inherently more expensive and you set a more difficult hurdle for investors to get over in order to make a trade worth it, people will be more vulnerable to risk and trade less. It's very simple. But after this, Anderson Cooper then asked Bernie Sanders if he knew how much it would cost for everything he wants to do. Free tuition for public college, student loan debt forgiveness, and I don't believe it was mentioned, but I'll mention the other things that he supports in the Green New Deal, which was all of it. So that's the transformation of all structures in the U.S. to solar or wind, transformation of all vehicles into electric cars. So regardless of all these specifics, we're talking about an astronomical amount of money and resources here, an unprecedented level of spending, in fact. And the answer Bernie Sanders gave here was not surprising, and it would have been hilarious too if it wasn't so terrifying. Cooper asked Sanders if he had a price tag for all the things he wants to do, which he would never be able to do anyway, thank goodness. But Bernie Sanders' response was that he does not have a price tag. He outright said, we're going to pay for it with this Wall Street tax, but he doesn't know how much it's going to cost. Just another example of why government is so unbelievably irresponsible, because after all, why should Bernie Sanders care? Why should he figure out how much it's going to cost? It's not his money. He didn't have to work for it. He just gets to throw around the money he takes from you after you worked for it, so why be frugal? Why exercise a little thrift? Why be responsible? There is no incentive to be any of these things. Just imagine for a moment if Bernie Sanders was an executive in a business and he does a presentation on some new project he wants to do. And when he's asked how much it's going to cost, he says, I don't know. Considering private companies have to actually care about finances, I would suspect he would be fired on the spot. But here's another funny thing. Bernie Sanders said that, he can't explain all of it, he doesn't know how much it'll all cost, and that he can't rattle off every nickel and dime for these things. So in other words, he's ill-prepared, and he doesn't know the answer to the ultimate question about his proposed ideas. But the very disingenuous thing here is when Bernie Sanders said he can't rattle off every nickel and dime for these programs. Now, that would be a fine answer if we were actually talking about nickels and dimes or maybe a couple dollars, but we are not. We are talking about trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars. I don't need him to explain every nickel and dime. I would just ask for an explanation for, let's say, each pallet with $1 billion on it that will be thrown away over this. How's that for a compromise? My point here is this. If Bernie Sanders can't account for maybe several $1 million, or heck, maybe even several $100 million, I could understand that with a $1 trillion proposal. But if you can't tell us within a margin of error of a few $1 billion how much this is going to cost, then you're just a joke. And that's something that a good amount of people have known for quite some time about Bernie Sanders. It's just more evidence on the pile that this guy is ridiculous, and it's shocking that people take him seriously. But that's all for now. Please like, subscribe, and share, and all that good stuff, and take it easy, my friends.